but that's fine. So good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. I'm Senator Saud Anwar, and I'm currently serving as Senator for the 3rd Senate District, which includes the towns of East Hartford, South Windsor, Ellington, and East Windsor. I wanted to welcome everyone to the Combined Children's and Education Committee Informational Forum on Early Childhood Education Centers and Educators. I wanted to first ask my esteemed co-chair to say her introductory remarks. I have prepared remarks as well, so I'll start that first with Representative Liz Lenehan, my co-chair for the Kids Committee, and then I obviously am with my esteemed colleagues from the Education Committee who are going to be able to say their few introductory remarks. So Representative Lenehan.
Thank you very much, Senator. Thank you so much for your leadership on this issue. We are so lucky to have you, Senator, and to really be pushing forward with this, to getting the answers that we need so that we can make the changes that are appropriate and necessary. So the only opening remarks I have are welcome. I look forward to listening. And again, thank you so much for your leadership, sir.
Thank you so much. I feel better every time I hear you. Miss you to seeing you in person. And with me is my friend and a colleague and Senator Doug McCrory. Senator McCrory.
Thank you there, young man. And I'm glad you have the wherewithal, along with my co-chair, who's going to introduce himself, to put this forum together. I think it's a great opportunity for us to come together after we did so much work last year, making sure those powers to be understood that early childhood education is so important to the state of Connecticut and the investments we made. So I'm glad we're here to fine tune those investments and make sure the children and the families get the supports they need. I think we're going to have a great conversation and move our state forward. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic on to my colleague and my co-chair, Bobby Sanchez.
Thank you, Senator McCrory. And thank you, senators and representatives and all the familiar faces that I see here today. Yes, so very important. Early child care is for not only for our state, but for our country. We made it loud and clear last year that there are so many issues at hand, particularly trying to get preschool teachers into the field, pay them a good salary, because we don't pay them a very good salary, and also to add more slots for infant toddler care, because we failed in that area here in the state of Connecticut. So a lot to talk about, and I look forward to hearing from all the professionals that we have invited to come on here today and to give us some feedback and information about what's going on in Connecticut. And hopefully this session, we can really work hard to try to remedy some of the negative things that have happened in early childcare and focus more on positive things and also fund it. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Sanchez. Thank you for your leadership and passion around this issue. You're very inspiring, and I can't thank you enough for being a partner in this effort. Just for everybody's knowledge, we are live on CTN. We are being recorded and also are on YouTube live as well at this time. As Representative Sanchez had mentioned, that in 2022, our session was focusing on a number of things. And one of the areas that we had looked at was the child care educators and child care centers. And we as a state recognized that there was an immediate need to try and address the needs for this industry, but also for making sure that we save this industry, save the people who are taking care of our children. But as we did what we did to provide the support, we acknowledged even at that time that that was a Band-Aid strategy. We needed to try and save the industry, but we needed to have a comprehensive approach. And today we are going to have a conversation about that comprehensive approach. And it's important that we look at what are the things that we have to look at as a state, as a legislative body, and also our leaders in the state about the next steps. I'm hoping our conversation today is going to not only be about convening the stakeholders, but also get an update on the current status and listen to the concerns that many of our stakeholders have, and then identify areas of opportunity and begin to develop at least a 1-year and a 5-year plan, and also create a way of having sustainability built around the childhood education system and recruitment of child care educators. So that's something that we are hoping to be able to achieve today. Why do we need to do this? This should not be no secret. This is one of the most essential part of any society, any community. And the first 5 years of our children's life are arguably the most important years. That is where we actually set the tone, set the strategy for taking care of our children. And another component that we have highlighted in the past is that our economic future of the state depends on our ability to have a robust, strong, sustainable, healthy, compassionate, and appropriate child care education system, early child care education system with child care educators who are able to provide the love and care our children deserve. This is the first domino that would fall if we want an economic stability in our state. And that's why we have a responsibility to develop a long-term, good strategy for this. The issues, I would divide them into 3 broad categories with respect to the areas of opportunity. One of those areas is about the workforce, which is our early child care teachers and educators. And the second part is the child care centers. And the third part is Office of Early Childhood. These 3 different partners have to have strategies and specific to them. I'll just list some of the things that I've heard around in my conversations, and then we'll obviously hear directly from the people today. But when we start with our child educators, there's a conversation about how do we fill this pipeline? How do we get more people to be part of this? Where we go through the high school and have more children look at this in high school and then community college, and then have a no-cost education opportunity for them, and create incentivized opportunity for individuals to make this as their profession, give loan forgiveness options as well. Healthcare remains a big challenge for the early child care educators. Again, having automatic enrollment of the teachers' children to be on Care for Kids program, using existing centers for training of new graduates. These are some of the things which would create win-win strategies across the board. We feel for the child care centers, there are specific challenges that the administrators are facing, the owners are facing. Now the various franchises are moving into our state as well. And we need to look at this landscape and see what is the way forward to address this and manage this in a manner, and creating a simplification of the process for Care for Kids, coordination of early child care centers with community school superintendents, and have wraparound services as well, and also look at transportation issues. For the Office of Early Childhood, again, as a legislator, I would say looking and listening to the needs across the state, I feel that we need more personnel, more liaisons for the early child care centers. And if we as a state are going to have a conversation about universal pre-K, those conversations should enhance the existing system rather than dismantle it. And also see how we can, as a state, move away from punitive strategies to build up strategy for the existing centers and educators. So with all of this background and a lot of information, I wanted to have our first and most critical speaker, a passionate individual who understands this, who's been working on this aspect, our Commissioner Beth Pai, Commissioner for Office of Early Childhood. Commissioner, thank you, and thank you for changing your schedule for us. We are very appreciative
Sure.
of your presence.
Well, happy to be here. And I don't have prepared remarks. I really just want to share with you the state of the field now, and really want to hear from you what your questions are and answer your questions. There are a lot of great advocates on this call right now in the legislature and in the community. And I should also say that I think Connecticut came through the pandemic better than most states when it comes to childcare, and we were able to communicate with the field well. And a lot of that had to do with the advocacy community setting up regular phone calls, inviting us on and others on, helped us really communicate well. We also worked with United Way to communicate. and emailed directly to programs as much as we could. We know that there were challenges that communication couldn't solve, but the communication was part of the solution. And I'm just really grateful for all the partners that helped get those messages out. It's been an incredibly challenging time for childcare. That's why we're here today. It's no surprise to you. Programs are having huge challenges. I've just had 3 listening sessions with the field, 1 on Zoom and 2 live, and we are planning another session with the family group homes because Senator Anwar and Representative Linehan, you're incredible leaders, and you both are signaling we need new approaches. And Connecticut really lags the rest of the country in its use of group family child care homes, which are homes a little bit bigger than family child care homes and smaller than centers. But we have very, very few in Connecticut because of, we're trying to understand why. Some of it's the regulatory structure, but we see family child care as an important part of this system. And we see group family homes as a way that family child care providers could serve more infants and toddlers, which is our big problem. But let me tell you what we heard from providers. They said the stabilization funds were very helpful, and it's how they stayed open. And after I sent this letter to the field, I got probably 5 or 6 emails to say we would not have been open without those federal relief funds and you getting them out to us. And I will tell you, from the beginning of the pandemic till now, Connecticut has about 97% of the number of centers and family homes that it had at the beginning of the pandemic. On average, states have lost 9%. But in terms of capacity, we actually have more slot capacity than we did before the pandemic because programs that closed probably had smaller license capacity than programs that opened. So we're proud of that, but don't let that fool you, because though there's licensed capacity, programs are having difficulty hiring staff, and there are hundreds of programs across the state that are closed. Not because there aren't parents waiting, but because there are not enough staff. And I had some incredible testimony to that end at these listening sessions. So stabilization funds were helpful, and I just shared some data on that. Care for Kids funding being expanded was helpful to programs and helpful to families. That is, some of that is funded by ARPA, but that programs found it helpful that families could access Care for Kids, and the parent portal led to fewer challenges, though still we struggle with keeping up with the calls and the demand. So again, not saying everything's perfect at all, but having that additional funding for Care for Kids was helpful. The other thing we heard was, sorry, I'm just going to my notes. The number one thing was that programs are struggling to recruit and train staff. Even when they can recruit staff, getting them trained and having the staff available to train and support them in the classroom to get them ready is really challenging. So they're looking to OEC to be more helpful and find more ways that they can support them through higher ed, et cetera, to help get them ready. They said to us, you need to help us help the world understand what a great profession this is, because right now the status of childcare is low, and we want OEC and others to help us understand that it's a profession worth pursuing. They also said Care for Kids could be more responsive and timelier for families and for providers, and that OEC can do a better job, and I'm focusing on things we can do, but they want to know about all that we're offering in terms of supports. And so in response to that, we sent the field a letter with all the supports we've been able to put together with the federal funding, just to make sure everyone knew. And there are many partners on this call that helped us with that. So, those are the challenges. The opportunities have been that we've been able to get stabilization funds. There's more Care for Kids funding. There's a 25% bonus for programs that are centers that are accredited. That state funded programs were able to make it because of the allotment of the funds that the legislature appropriated over the pandemic, even though their enrollments weren't full. It helped to increase infant toddler rates at state-funded programs, and it helped to pay the background check fees. So you all should know it's $85 per employee, but OEC has been paying that throughout the pandemic. And then I'm not going to take time to go over the resources that are out there, but just to say it's a time of tremendous challenge. It's complicated from a policy point of view. As you know, Senator Anwar, the way you were talking, it was clear to anyone that it's complicated. We have about 25% of the programs in the state that are state-funded programs. But 3/4 of these programs, and some of those state-funded programs who just take some spaces, are entirely private businesses. And so you have an industry that is under stress because of workforce issues. And you have an industry under stress because families can't afford to pay the full cost of quality, much like families don't pay for public schools. If everyone parent had to pay for a public school, attendance would be a little different and the quality and challenges would be different. So the wages are too low, and that has been something that, Representative Sanchez had us do a salary, sort of a what should the salary be, and I have that for today if you'd like, Representative Sanchez, when the time comes. But we've been doing a lot of research. We've been listening to parents. We have a parent survey out there now. 5,000 parents have answered to tell us what they need, because their needs have changed since the pandemic. So how do we build a system that responds to their changing needs and that is informed by parents? We want to hear from providers, but we want to know what parents need, and that's changed over time. So I think Connecticut has one of the best early childhood systems in the country. And that will say to you that there's a lot of work to do all over this country. And this is a size and scale of a challenge that is a societal challenge. It requires a federal response. And we've been working closely with the federal delegation and Governor Lamont and his team in DC to make that clear, that this is needs a major investment, and a federal investment has to be part of that solution. And you all stepped up last year and made significant state investments. So I'll stop there. I know you have other presenters, and I have plenty of information to questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Bai. I understand you have some time available, because we will have, after everybody has an opportunity to present, we are hoping to have a conversation.
I will be here. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I need to hear. Yeah.
Perfect. And thank you for your hearing sessions, and thank you for such an amazing advocate and leader. The next person on our list is Liz Fraser, who is the Director of Policy for Connecticut Association for Human Services. Ms. Fraser, you're on.
Hi, thank you. And it's really nice to be back in person, and thank you all for having us here today. It's a really, really important topic. I'm going to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint to share, if I could find it here. Presenter view. Let's see if that's it. Okay. Is that great? Okay. I'm going to need to just find my notes because they're not coming up here. So I'm going to read from my notes here. Part of our new normal is that the childcare industry continues to be in crisis. Across the country, including here in Connecticut, the childcare industry continues to experience the consequences of a business model that is no longer viable for many of our early care providers or for families. During the month of April in 2022, the Connecticut Association of Human Services, CAUSE, conducted a simple survey to gauge the operational status of early care programs in Connecticut. What we learned gives us a window into the challenges that the early care community continues to face. 204 providers with a combined license capacity of almost 16,000 children responded to the survey, and 38 family child providers also responded. Respondents represented 13.5% of total license capacity at the time, and is representative of a cross-section of early care business models across a diverse geographic area. The center providers were divided into, we also pulled them out and responded. We pulled out the state-funded programs like school readiness programs and child development centers. We pulled out the private tuition-based providers and also the private tuition-based providers that also have school readiness slots. And also 38 family childcare providers responded. The themes of the survey, staffing, losses, and closures are pervasive. Parents struggle with the cost of early care and education. Finances, low morale, and mental health exacerbate the crisis. And the business of early care and education is really at a crossroads. Providers reported that the income received from tuition, federal subsidies, and state funding is just not enough to keep up with the cost of running an early care business. Meanwhile, parents who need to work struggle to find the care and pay the tuition, which often exceeds that of state colleges. There we go. So staffing losses and classroom closures were pervasive. 119 staff members left their programs for other 819 and a half. That was a half position, I assume, not a half person. Staff members left their programs for other opportunities. And if you project that out, it would be about 6,000 industry-wide. That was in a 6-month period from November to April. 222 classrooms were either closed or had limited enrollment, and 3,266 fewer children were being served than pre-pandemic. And that it projects out to be about 24,000 spaces across the industry that were not being served at the time. I think that the comments from the survey really reflected that the overarching problem is the inability to hire and retain, as Commissioner Bai said, the staffing necessary to maintain required ratios and provide quality care. Most programs simply do not bring in enough income to provide competitive wages and benefits that are commensurate with education, training, and experience. And unlike other industries, the childcare industry is uniquely less able to pass higher costs along to customers. Childcare tuition is typically already their customers' first or second highest household expense. Low wages just don't attract prospective employees. As soon as we hire someone, we usually have someone else resigning. Experienced staff are not available, and the inexperienced staff impact quality. Family childcare providers reported that they were losing substitutes and assistants to better paying jobs, and they were serving fewer children than the pre-pandemic. And comments, I barely break even. With the stress involved, I'm wondering if it's worth staying open. So enrollment in business viability is a really important issue. With very narrow business margins, viability in this industry rests at operating at close to license capacity. Many providers estimated they needed to have close to 95% enrollment to break even. As you can see, during the survey, it was really around 80%, 76% for preschool, 80% for infants and toddlers, and 56% for school-age children. That's what they were running. That was what they had enrolled. Private-based tuition providers and that are both for-profit and nonprofit. Some of the private tuition-based providers are nonprofit also, make up about 80%, as Commissioner Bai was saying, 75 to 80% of all licensed care, which is by far the largest sector of the industry. And in order for parents to work, it's imperative that this sector, along with state-funded programs, remains viable. State-funded programs, such as the Child Development Center, school readiness programs, rely on state funding to provide care for children in lower income families. And survey data shows that these programs were also hard hit by the pandemic and were operating at well below capacity. The Office of Early Childhood did take really good measures in trying to mitigate that by allowing providers to enroll, to be paid by their classroom, not by their attendance. So during the pandemic, they were actually able to make do and get through the pandemic really pretty well. Right now, though, we're back to pre-pandemic funding based on the number of children in attendance and not capacity. And they, just like the rest of the industry right now, are finding it extremely hard to hire staff. And I think you'll hear stories later on about how difficult it is to keep classrooms open. This affects our low-income families in Connecticut. And they also, state-funded centers, I should also remind people that they face a unique set of challenges. They are designed to be high-quality programs, ensuring that low-income children have access to quality care. They must be accredited by the NEYC, and state law requires providers to work towards the goal of having bachelor degree teachers in each classroom. We are raising our standards because we understand about brain development, we understand about early learning, and we need to keep up with the times as far as providing pay and benefits. So the business viability is low, and the cost for parents to work of the respondents, 30% of the providers surveyed estimated that a large percentage of their families struggle with the cost of their early care program. And that would include those that are on, let me say this clearly, that would be not including those that are receiving subsidies. These are the people that are not receiving subsidies. A large percentage of their families are struggling with the cost of early care and education. 19% suggested little over 1/3 of their families struggle with costs, and 18 estimated that a moderate number of their families struggled with costs, and 30% estimated that only a small percentage of their families struggled. And that actually shows the two Connecticuts, because in some parts of our state, we have wealthy families that can actually afford the cost of high quality programs. One provider, though, did say that we are located in a wealthy community, but even in this community, families will only tolerate a certain level of tuition costs. Our teachers cannot afford to live in the community, so we need to entice them to commute to us. Quality teachers with degrees can and do leave our program for higher wages. They love working with us, but must face the reality that they have to pay their bills, and access to affordable health care is also an issue. Federal subsidy programs like Care for Kids do help defray the costs for some families. However, to be eligible for a Care for Kids subsidy, a family of 4 can earn an income of not more than a little over $75,000. If the same family earned just a little bit more, they would need to pay about 20% of their gross income for early care. So that it is making it extremely difficult for parents to afford care, even with the costs as they are. This is just a quote from one of the providers. About 60% of all the center-based providers reported lower morale and mental health issues. Comments from providers indicated that many felt disrespected as professionals, that they were worn out from the intensity of working in early care throughout the pandemic. And now, due to staffing shortages, many providers reported substituting in classrooms without enough time to run their businesses. Some providers have increased personal debt, others have had to delay bill payments, and recently I spoke with several providers in different areas of the state who were using equity from their businesses to keep afloat and had not paid themselves in over a year. The financial and personal toll on providers indicates that this crisis is far from over. And financial worries were also on the top of the list of family home providers. About 58% of family home providers reported increased personal debt, and 1/3 reported delays in paying business expenses. The economic implications. The fact is that the early care business model has become untenable. It's become unaffordable for low and middle income families and is inequitable, with childcare related challenges falling disproportionately on women, particularly women of color. Many parents have left, are left having to choose between work and caring for their families, which impacts women at an alarming rate. CBIA reported at about the same time I put out this report that the first 2 weeks in April 2022, of the parents needing to stay home due to early care issues, 76% were women, which was well over the national average. And there's also some data indicating that many women have not returned to the workforce, perhaps waiting until their children are older. This will have impact on their short-term and long-term financial security, and it has potential implications for retirement as well. This is not just a parent and provider issue, it's an economic problem for the state. We will need younger workers, and younger workers will need childcare. According to the Economic Policy Institute, meaningful childcare reform that capped families' childcare expenses at 7% of their income would save a typical Connecticut family with an infant about over $9,000 on childcare costs and free up 13.2% of their post-childcare annual income to spend on other necessities. More parents would have opportunities to enter the labor force and to work. And there are indications that it would bring quite a bit of money into our economy in Connecticut. I want to just reiterate, because it's really important, what Commissioner Bai said. Federal ARPA funding really helped to stabilize the early care industry, and this was in great part due to the Office of Early Childhood. The OEC's quick response ensured that Connecticut was one of the first states to get this funding into the hands of providers, and that it was distributed equitably across the entire community of licensed programs. Additionally, this past spring, as many of you know, intensive advocacy efforts from the early child care and education community led to historic state investments in the early care system. The legislature listened to parents and providers about issues within the industry and acted, and included $183 million in the 2022-23 state budget. And some of this will go to wage enhancements across all types of programs, and many other very valuable programs are being planned with that money. Providers are extremely grateful for the relief, but they know that unfortunately, it's just not enough to have a long-term effect on the industry. It will take a lot more to fix this system of care that supports our economy, working parents, and gives children a strong start at the most critical learning point and growing point in their life. And just some final thoughts. We really are at an early childhood crossroad. Thousands of children across Connecticut are not in childcare right now because there are no teachers to fill classrooms. What does that mean for parents? And what does this mean for children? And what does this mean for Connecticut's economic growth? Even as we try to attract businesses and a younger workforce to Connecticut, we are not fully considering the value of early care and education as the underpinning of a strong workforce and economy. Childcare is an investment in the future of our workforce, our families, our children, and our state. Young families need childcare to work. How many companies would consider moving here because they knew they could attract young families? How much additional spending power would be in the pockets of our families in Connecticut to pump back into our economy? As a survey made clear, the industry is in trouble. Federal funding would be really appreciated and is greatly needed, and we're working on it. However, there is a real possibility that it might not be here in time to provide much needed relief or be here at all. We need to prioritize this as an investment if we want to keep our folks in the state, our children growing. And I just wanted to say thank you, and the complete report can be found at our website. And thank you very much for indulging me.
Thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you for sharing this data. I know many of my colleagues and I have questions, but I feel it's worthy to have more people part of the conversation, and then we'll come to the Q&A part of our informational forum. The next person on our list to speak is Dr. Marlo Grappone, who's the Executive Director for Human Resources Agency of New Britain. Ms. Grappone, Dr. Grappone, you're on.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marlo Grappone. I'm the Executive Director at HRA of New Britain, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity to share among so many great colleagues that are very passionate about early childhood education, as we are here at HRA as well. I also have a presentation to share, so I'm going to go ahead and share that if I may. So, and is that sharing properly? I hope so.
It is.
Okay, our mission, HRA, is a community action agency. It's one of 9 agencies across the state that is dedicated to provide services, multi-services to families. But one of the primary services that we provide as an organization is our child care program. You can see here that we also took part in engaging in advocacy with many of our partners across the state, legislators, parents, to raise the voice on the importance of the issue of fixing childcare for our state. As many have already mentioned during this presentation, this is a critical issue to our communities, and it's very important to us as an organization to take part in it. This photo here shows how parents were sharing feedback during one of our advocacy events in terms of what would be an impact for them if they couldn't have childcare. Many of them provided very poignant stories that we sent up to legislation so that their voices could be heard. But today, I'm here to give an update on what's happening currently within our organization. We are a NIAC accredited organization, fully NIAC accredited. We have been providing early childhood education services since HRA's inception in 1964. So we have absolutely been a part of the childcare industry since then, and have taken part in all of the improvements that have made over the years, thanks to limited but continual investments that were made. And so that's why it's so important to show that those investments are reaching us as providers, but that there's a clear and present need for more. Currently, we have a significant number of children in our programs that are not receiving care. Program-wide, HRA operates 36 classrooms. Out of those 36 classrooms, we have 12 teaching staff that are vacant, 26 teacher assistant staff positions that are vacant. This is impacting a total of 322 children for our program. To put it into perspective, because Commissioner Bai did mention earlier about our operating ability during COVID, absolutely agree with her statements. During COVID, we were able to pull through. And in fact, during COVID operations, we were able to continually operate at about 80% of our enrollment levels. However, since the world has reopened and job opportunities have increased with lower qualifications and higher pay, attracting our staff, as well as those that we could potentially recruit, this is the current picture, where we are now at about 50% of our potential enrollment in programs. So those state-funded programs that we operate, because we do operate multiple sources of funding within our programs, through the state-funded programs, we're missing 2 toddler teachers and 5 toddler teacher assistants. That's a total of 32 infant toddler slots that will remain vacant until we're able to fill these positions. In our preschool program, those are 2 teachers and 7 teacher assistants for 104 children that are unable to be placed until we are filling those positions. In our Head Start funded program, which are federally funded programs. Traditionally, these are positions that do not move. These are, in fact, positions where staff move into internally because the federally funded program has a better rate and better possibilities for paying our staff more accordingly. But unfortunately, even in our federally funded programs, we continue to experience shortage of staff. 5 early Head Start teachers are missing, 3 early Head Start teacher assistants for a total of 24 children under the age of 3 for Head Start services that are not able to be placed. And within our Head Start program, which is the program that serves the preschool age children and is federally funded, 3 teachers, 11 teacher assistants for a total of 162 children that cannot be placed at this moment. So the issue is very real. There's also obviously an impact on parents as a result of this. Without safe, affordable childcare, parents are unable to work, period. They may be unable to commit to additional hours or a second job that is needed to make ends meet. Many families have to operate on multiple jobs, multiple members of the household employed in order to be able to survive. They may have to resort to unstable or unsafe options that will affect their child's growth as well as their own job performance. A parent who's worried about their child at work cannot perform to the level that they should. A parent that is constantly contacted at work because their childcare arrangements have changed or have been canceled or need to cancel also cannot perform to the level that is needed at work. This has a ricochet effect that will impact the economic stability of the entire household. That's why we know that this issue can also impact families. With the socioeconomic climate that we have currently, where 2 to 4 income households are needed in order to survive, where low to moderate income retirement is not even feasible until the age of 70, where youth are seeking opportunities to further their own potential in the world of work through education and training. Gone are the days where grandparents can stay at home and quit their job in order to take care of their grandchildren. Gone are the days where the older siblings can dedicate their time to ensure that their younger sibling is cared for and safe, so that mom and dad or any adult in the household that is supporting the children is able to then go and work. Life has changed. And so this issue also impacts everyone else in the family. Relying on that family care limits possibilities for improvement in that household. As a community action agency, we're dedicated to helping households to raise themselves out of poverty. And childcare is always the #1 need, right alongside affordable housing. Not having childcare options actually impacts every household member. A significant and permanent increase in reimbursement rates is needed in order to stabilize our system and provide support to the families as needed. The low payment rates from the state makes it impossible to pay competitive wages. And it's just a fact of life that we're not able to compete with the wages that are available out in the world of work right now. Stabilization funds did help us to provide payouts to our staff. Absolutely. And we're very grateful for those funds that came to us that definitely assisted us in the process of maintaining our staffing levels, as well as our operations in place during the height of COVID, and even into these current months. However, because those funds were not sustainable beyond 2023, as a business, it's difficult for us to make a commitment to long-term costs and continuing costs, which are involved in providing increases to our staff. That's why we went with making durational payments to our staff, which we could guarantee that we would have the funds available to make. However, sustainability is key in order for us to be able to increase the rates of pay for our staff. We're in a world of work that keeps changing. For years in our system of early childhood, educational requirements were the main barrier to recruitment. So many times this has been discussed in our industry, that seeking teachers that are qualified and experienced in order to provide the high quality level of care that we know is needed in order to provide that environment that the children can grow and learn safely. It's impossible now, right? But that is not even the main point that is holding us back from recruiting people that are passionate and loving and caring in this field. With wages for opportunities for employment, with a high school diploma soaring up beyond $20 per hour within municipalities as well as school districts, we are unable to compete to attract and retain new staff. Our entry-level positions are paid between $15 to $18 per hour. $18 per hour being for someone who comes through with a master's degree. So when you have someone with a high school diploma with a possibility for earning $20 per hour for an administrative assistant within a municipality, you're really looking at even your long-term staff increasingly leaving in order to transition to these higher paying jobs. In many cases, these jobs are even less demanding than the jobs that they have currently. We've spoken about regulatory requirements, and we've spoken about how many barriers are present for operations, for providers, but even for the teachers themselves, the increasing regulatory requirements in order to provide educational programming to the children that is high quality, that is really promoting their healthy growth and development, has placed tremendous amounts of burden and stress on the teaching staff. COVID aside, even prior to COVID, the demands on the teaching staff were real and were part of the reason why so many people and so many teachers transitioned out of the programs, because they truly felt that they were not being paid in accordance with the level of work that was being required of them. So now having these opportunities out there in the community that are really paying more for less is just something that we cannot fault them for taking part in, because they too have families to support. So again, I say I'm very grateful for this opportunity to take part in this ongoing conversation. I'm grateful for all of you and your efforts, both in listening to us and in considering these points as you move forward with seeking options to provide services in the community. But I really would like to urge you to please really know that this is an issue that is going to continue to affect us beyond a number of the solutions that you're considering. But we are here as providers to take part in this effort along with you, because we are just as committed to the children and families across the state. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garpone, for another eye-opening and concerning data and information. Our next speaker is one of my friends, Eva Bermudez Zimmerman. She's the Director of Childcare, CSEA SEIU Local 2001. Eva, you're on.
Thank you for having me. I wanted to highlight the stories and the compelling lives that childcare providers hold here in the state of Connecticut. Very important jobs that were highlighted by the Commissioner, by Director Marlowe, and Liz Frazier from CAUSE as well. And there is no secret here as to the backbone of Connecticut's future. It's knowing that we have a workforce that is diligent, committed, and also incorporates childcare workers. If we did not have that backbone so present and so readily available to maintain their doors open in a crisis and in basically everyday aspects of our lives, we wouldn't have the ability to have businesses running and functioning. That also includes family childcare providers. In the long list of educators that represent childcare here in the state of Connecticut, we have childcare centers, we have family group homes, we also have family daycare providers. And of course, within that long list, there's subcategories of different types of employees that were highlighted that must have a degree in order to complete and satisfy the needs of that workforce, as well as many people who have CDAs, childcare development associate's degrees, and are credentialed and qualified to care for children here in our state. But I'm going to take some time out really quickly to highlight family childcare providers. I do represent them. CSEA represents childcare centers, Head Start centers, and as well family in-home childcare providers. The family childcare providers, as we know it right now, because of a lot of consideration and support from the legislative body here in Connecticut, we've been fortunate to have a contract specifically for Care for Kids providers that took the salary from $2.23 an hour in 2002, when the program was then called Maximus. Now it's called Care for Kids, that subsidy program, now pushing it over to $13.74 an hour. Now, one might think, well, that's comparable to the everyday worker here, and might consider they're on the trajectory to making and satisfying a $15 wage, especially when you're considering that that cost might be reflective of each individual kid that they care for. What you don't see, and what unfortunately many parents don't really see, is all that work that goes behind the scenes to take that money that's being paid out, Care for Kids subsidies, maybe some grants, individual donors, the support from the family themselves, paying in for their own care, and then converting that into the care that we see every single day, be it in centers, group homes, or home-based family childcare. The system works the same way. Too often, we do not have the opportunity to properly support the workers with the amount of money that they're getting from just parents, or from just a subsidy, or from those different sources. Many providers have a mixed system of who they take in to provide that care. We have providers that might have majority Care for Kids or subsidized children, but we also see a lot of providers who have maybe one or two subsidized Care for Kids children, and then the remaining children in their care are private pay. The parents are paying out of pocket, and maybe the provider themselves is subsidizing that care. Another point that many people don't understand is the cost of care for whoever is providing that care has to be the same all around. So a provider can't tell Jane Smith that they're going to charge Jane $450 a week for one child, and then turn around and say to Joey Smith that they're going to charge them $250 because there's more hardship there. That's not how it works. The provider has the opportunity to find grants and support to make up that difference. And when you look at that difference that's being made up, and they're looking for different funding sources, again, it's a struggle to make sure that all of those funding sources support quality education, support quality nutrition within the care, also make sure that there's a space that is up to date and is, impeccable. Most providers that I visited, and in my 10 years with this workforce, I have visited so many homes and so many childcare centers. It is beyond the hundreds. I think I'm going into the 500s now, and I do it with so much pleasure. But every time I visit, and most recently I went to Norma Sennett's childcare, it takes me aback how much money providers put into their space, how much compassion they put in every single day into the job that they do. So going back to some other stats here, and I don't want to completely nerd out, but the statistics do matter. 28% of the child care workforce since the pandemic has just fizzled out. And those numbers were reflective even before we had COVID, right? They weren't as high, but COVID has exacerbated the need for support in that workforce. As the commissioner mentioned, there has been sustainability grants. There's been a lot of advocacy. I do want to highlight the advocacy of Childcare for Connecticut's Future, an organization of coalitions of over 80 nonprofits that came together and realized, wow, we cannot just advocate for childcare providers in a silo. We have to connect it with the parent voice, with the advocacy voice, in order to make these transformational changes when it comes to funding and restructuring of childcare in our state. The other detail that I do want to promote here in Connecticut, that we are a leader. Because of this last legislative session in 2022, the $183 million that Senator Anwar, Representative Sanchez, and others, and Senator McCory put their time, compassion into making sure that this was a priority, we were able to get a lot of support for those providers who are about to close, and do it in a way that a lot of states basically ignored. I wanted to quickly show a reel of pictures so that you can see the faces and the compassion that is shown through every single day. And in this slide of pictures, I did grab a few from other states that were sent to me because they were inspired by us, by Connecticut and our action, our day of action, to promote childcare here in Connecticut and make sure that we were discussing it in all facets of work life, in parent life, grandparents, guardians, because this impacts everyone here. If you're someone who's childless and you're thinking, well, why does this matter to me? I don't have any children. I don't have any grandchildren. Well, when you look at your property taxes, when you look at your mill rate, oftentimes families are wanting to move in depending on the childcare quality, depending on the schools, how accessible those childcare systems are. And if you don't see a childcare system close to you and you're in a childcare desert, as a parent, as a family who wants to move in, create that balance in your community, it's really hard to maintain that tax system in your town low when you don't have new people coming in, right? So everyone's impacted here. If you're retired, same thing goes. So let me quickly highlight some of these beautiful faces of children and providers who are inspired by the action that we did on March 15th. And then on May 9th, did a nationwide action. On the slide deck, there's also pictures of providers handing out personal protective equipment during COVID, taking the time out to volunteer in their very busy work schedules while they're doing educational credentials and maintaining their licenses and caring for others to help themselves and help communities who need it the most. So I'll put that up right now. Hopefully this works. Doing it from my phone. Oh, this is so unfortunate. You always have to test technology before you play. Okay. Let me stop the slide deck. Technical difficulties, everyone. Okay, well, the show must go on, right? If it's okay with the committee, I will make sure that if there's a link that we can share that slide deck, because it has at least 40 pictures that are just inspiring of kids coming together and being active. In closing, we wanna reinstate that childcare is not just one group of people. It's many, many people, most of them women, most of them having families of their own, coming into this profession with a lot of passion and qualified backgrounds. So highlighting their stories is highlighting the story of an everyday American, an everyday kinetic nutmegger, as one could say, and making sure that we're still running. So thank you for your time, and I do hope that we have other opportunities to highlight family childcare providers as well as providers statewide in all of the hard work that they do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we will absolutely share the slide deck for everyone. And then for my legislators who are listening and anybody else who's listening, I think if you make time to visit your local district community early child care center, you will recognize and become an advocate yourself, because when you see those smiling faces and you see the smiling faces and commitment of the educators showing love, taking care of them, and providing them the care that all children deserve, you want to make sure that we have a system in place, and we cannot afford as a state for this system to fall apart. We need to now hear from some parents as well, and then we have Nicole Messier, who's one of the parents who we would love to hear from you. Nicole.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Messier. I live in Preston with my husband and 2 daughters, Charlotte, who is 4, and Everly, who is 17 months old. I did recently have to quit my job and stay at home with my daughters due to the cost of childcare. So I'm here today to kind of give a voice to the people that are kind of in the same predicament that I am, that have also had to quit the workforce and stay at home with their children. So just a little backstory. I gave birth to my daughter, my oldest daughter, Charlotte, in February of 2018. And then in June of 2018, I started a new position in a very busy medical office. As a 2-income family, we really didn't have a hard time paying for daycare for just one child, especially being that prior to the pandemic. If she had a small cold, she was able to stay at daycare. We weren't getting calls after calls that she needed to be picked up. Fast forward to the first few months of 2020, when my husband and I decided that we wanted to have another baby. At first, we kind of thought we were a little bit crazy. You know, we were in a global health crisis, and is this really the best time to have another baby? And we knew that daycare costs were going to go up for us as well with another child. But we decided that there's no right time, so you just have to do it. In March of 2021, I gave birth to our youngest daughter, Everly, and there was no end in sight for the pandemic. I was able to stay home with her for about 12 weeks before having to go back to work and starting her in daycare. It was nerve-wracking because during a pandemic, you don't really want to send a 12-week-old into a germ-infested daycare, but we did know that the staff was doing everything they could to create a healthy and safe space for our kids. So that made us a little bit more comfortable. At first, it was not too bad. It was the summer months. We had no COVID cases in the center. There wasn't a whole lot of other illness going around, but as we transitioned into the fall months, that quickly changed. Every little cold or little symptom they got, they had to be sent home. If they were exposed to COVID, there was a 10-day quarantine. So it didn't matter if we were tested or if they didn't have symptoms, we were just home for 10 days. My husband is military, so that meant that I was the one taking the time off of work to be home with them. And as you can imagine, for somebody that gets paid by the hour, having to take that kind of time off unpaid and as frequently as it was happening, it was really breaking the bank for us. We did try to apply for Care for Kids, but we were told that we make too much money, so we did not qualify, which really for us was like, how do you make too much, but you can't afford your childcare? This past year, with everything else going up in cost, so did our daycare tuition. That has actually happened for us twice in the last year. Our tuition has gone up, which is to be expected with how the cost of living is. We did know that our center was still one of the lowest tuition rates in the area. And truthfully, we loved our center and wouldn't trust our girls with anybody else anyway. So it was at that time that we decided we needed to make some changes and that it just wasn't worth it for myself to be working anymore. What I was bringing home and what we were paying out in daycare was pretty much a wash. And I should mention that we were getting a military discount. We were also getting a sibling discount for having more than one child in the center. So even with those two discounts, we were pretty much breaking even. My employers were very sad to see me go. We were understaffed as it was. So even though they were upset that I was leaving, they were very understanding. They were supportive in my decision and knew why. It wasn't that I was not happy there. It was that we just really couldn't afford childcare anymore. So they have told me that if I ever want to come back, there's always a position available for me. So that's always nice to hear. My oldest daughter, Charlotte, misses her teachers and her friends very much. She tells us this daily. So it was a very tough decision because we know that our daughters were thriving there and they are very much social children. So it's hard not having them in that kind of setting every day. I'm thankful that we are able to make ends meet with just my husband's income, although there are weeks that are tougher than others. This process has made me painfully aware that we are not the only family going through this and that some of the other families that have had to make these similar decisions may not have been as fortunate as us. I know that at least 2 other families in our center were considering doing the same thing. As frustrating as all of this has been for us, we do realize it's not the fault of the daycare owner and that they're just trying to keep their business afloat. They do have to pay their staff, they have to pay their bills as well. So it's not any fault to them, it's more just the fault of the failed system and something does need to change. So Thank you for allowing me to share my story with you today.
Thank you so much for your testimony and sharing your experience. And then we get a glimpse of your daughter in the back. She is cute. I love her hairstyle.
Thank you.
And the next person on the list to give us a perspective is Beth Tiazzi, co-chair of the Collaborative for Colchester's Children. Beth.
Hello. Yes, Nicole is actually my sister-in-law. So all of our children are together right now while we're doing this, and it's actually a blessing that they're very quiet right now. Knock on wood. I'm actually going to be speaking on behalf of another parent who couldn't attend today because of work, but she wanted to share her story. So I'm just going to read verbatim what she wrote today. Thank you, Beth, for reading this on my behalf. I am unable to speak to you in person as I cannot take more time off work this week. I am a mother of 2 young children living in a 2-parent household. Both my husband and I work full-time. I consider myself lucky. Lucky my parents live nearby and can take care of my children 1 day a week to help offset the cost of daycare. However, the daycare centers do not give a discount for attending 4 days of the week. If you only use 4 days, you still have to pay for 5. I am lucky my corporate employer granted my request to work a condensed work week full-time in 4 days so I can realize daycare cost savings and spend more time with my children. I am forever grateful to the working mothers I reported up to who remembered what it was like having to juggle work with finding and paying for high quality daycare and wanted to make it better for the next generation of working mothers. I am lucky I can afford high quality childcare because of these accommodations. So why am I here today? I am here because despite all the cards stacked in my favor, I am struggling with finding high quality childcare, and I am not alone. A year ago, the Connecticut Voices for Children published a report stating 20% of Connecticut childcare centers permanently closed since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, and preschool capacity dropped by more than 10,000 slots. This is on top of a system already not meeting the capacity for childcare and preschool. I am lucky the daycare center and preschool my children attended since infants reopened in June of 2020. But they, like most other centers in the area, reopened to many challenges. The most impactful was attracting and retaining high-quality staff to care for children. My preschool age child's classroom was closed due to staffing shortages, illnesses, call-outs, etc., or illness exposure for a total of 10 weeks between last Thanksgiving and this June. That's 10 weeks of trying to work a full-time job while taking care of a 3-year-old at the same time as I could not find backup childcare. Everyone suffered. My child had too much screen time and not enough attention from me. I could not be a present parent or present employee. My work suffered, my mental health suffered, but worst of all, my child's development suffered. I am not unique. Speaking to friends in similar lucky circumstances across the state and across the region, they all have similar stories. The inability to find reliable and consistent high-quality childcare and early education. Several friends shared my frustration in the lack of consistency of the individuals caring for their children at a childcare center. It seems to be a revolving door. Where are all the early childhood educators going? It doesn't appear to be to other childcare centers. One friend who uses a nanny 1 day a week had 3 different nannies in 6 months, each quitting without more than a day notice because they could find easier work for higher pay outside of childcare. The shortage is not limited to early childhood care. Another friend has a child entering kindergarten and has been looking since last January for before and after school care for her child and still can't get coverage for every weekday. The job of an early childhood educator is hard. It's demanding, tiring, unappreciated, and underpaid. I am here today to give a voice to all the lucky working parents like me who find themselves burnt out and struggling with being able to find reliable, high-quality childcare. This must change. Like the working parents who supported and continue to support me, I want better for this generation of parents and children. Thank you. And as a side, I would just like to add a quick little snippet of my story. I have been a stay-at-home parent for 8 years. There was always a plan that I would eventually go back to work, and I have just continuously put it on hold because I knew, even with a bachelor's degree, finding a job and affording childcare just wasn't something that my family could afford. I am only recently able to go back to work part-time, and that is because I have a retired parent who is willing to help me with childcare. So I still don't feel comfortable and able to pay for childcare costs. So I had to wait in order to have that free childcare option. I am hoping once all three of my children are in full-time school that I will be able to find something, but I do hope for all parents, things do get easier. So thank you for letting us speak today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your perspective. And the next person on our list, before that, I just will put a question out there for anybody who can answer that later when we have the Q&A. You know, literally with every industry that we are having conversation with, people are saying they're having difficulty finding the workforce. And I had said in my initial remarks that this is the first domino that falls. If there was a way to look at the data for the state of Connecticut, if the reason people are not able to get the workforce is because they do not have childcare, it would be worthy to find out if that is the main cause and what percentage is this a main cause. We know it's a cause and we know it's probably a main cause, but it would be good to know the percentage so we actually can get more people around this conversation to have a sustainable strategy to move forward. Next is we have two speakers from the Regional Education Service Center. We have Jeff Kitching, who's the Executive Director for Advance, and Michelle Anderson, who's the Director of Early Childhood and Family Programs at Advance as well. You're on.
So I'll start. Thank you very much, Senator Anwar and Representative Linehan, Senator McCrory, and Representative Sanchez for putting together this really critical conversation. I'm Dr. Jeff Kitching. I'm the Executive Director at Advance, which is one of Connecticut's 6 RESCs. And I'm here with my colleague, Michelle Anderson, who has some information to share. But I just want to start off really representing all 6 of the RESCs. The Connecticut RESC Alliance is, has a 55-year history in Connecticut after being created by the General Assembly, of working not only with all 169 school districts and their communities across the state, but also serving as a critical partner in the area of early childhood. We run programs and provide services and supports across the state. All the RESCs do. Most of the RESC provide birth to 3 services across Connecticut. We are involved in managing school readiness initiatives in our regions across Connecticut. We provide quality professional learning for early childhood and daycare providers across the state through support and partnership with OEC. And just enhance the field of early childhood and early childhood education and childcare in so many ways. A great recent example of that was an event I had the pleasure of attending in Danbury. Senator Kushner, who's on the call today, was able to join us as well, where Ed Advance and the Danbury School Readiness Commission annually provides a professional learning opportunity where over 200 early childhood educators were there. They got to attend workshops on a variety of topics, including autism awareness, arts, STEM, accreditation for their centers. We had workshops presented in Spanish as well. They got to work together, learn together, network together. It was just incredible to see the energy in the room and the dedication that this group brings, especially in the face of the challenges that have been so nicely outlined by the other speakers today. So that's just one example of one RESC and what the RESC Alliance can bring. Just as we work collaboratively with the State Department of Ed, we are also a collaborator and partner with OEC. And because the RESCs can bring the capacity that we have, not only statewide, when the 6 RESCs get together as part of the Alliance, but regionally, individually, we have relationships with the providers in our region locally, so that statewide solutions, the RESCs are here to offer our help and to become a solution to some of the issues, again, that have been nicely defined. And so as the legislature debates and addresses and hopefully funds solutions for some of these issues, we want to be part of the conversation. We want to be part of the solution, and we have the capacity to do that. And so I will turn the rest of our time over to Michelle, who has some other information to share, as she is on a day-to-day basis directly connected with the providers in our region. Michelle.
Great, thank you, Jeff. And also, I do want to thank Senator Anwar and Representative Linehan for organizing this important conversation. Very important. And I recognize a lot of the representatives' names on the call, especially Senator Kushner, but many that I've known over the field throughout my time in the field that have been champions for early childhood and the family resource centers and home visitation and all the sectors that we work with. So thank you. As Jeff mentioned, the RESCs are no stranger to early childhood. EdAdvance is very fortunate because we have a very large scale early childhood department that works with all the sectors, families, staff, teachers, students. We work in homes with home visitation. We work with family childcare. We work with public schools that run preschool programs. We work with private and state funded. So when we go out in the field, we get perspectives from those, we call them mom and pop shops sometimes, those little nursery schools. We get perspectives from the larger school readiness programs, state funded programs. So through these encounters, we learn about the concerns that many of you have mentioned on this call. In terms of, I know the focus today is on the workforce and staff shortages. In terms of that, this is a field that certainly cannot absorb any more of this. We cannot retain folks, and we cannot continue this way because it is going to be a broken system. School readiness programs and state funded programs, a lot of RESCs work with their school readiness councils, have not seen increases in reimbursements in over 7 years. And while the field is extremely grateful for the one-time cash infusion that derived from the COVID funding that was mentioned before, it's just simply, we can't keep pace with the minimum wage. Centers are struggling. The minimum wage has increased to $5.85 per hour in 7 years. And in those 7 years, these state-funded programs have not received any increase. This is a true hardship to keep people in the classroom. We have a lot of staff in the private and public and state-funded center. And I love Dr. Marlowe. I loved your presentation because it just talked about it completely, and it really highlighted it, and it really painted a picture of despair within your own large program of how important this is. But we have a lot of teachers tempted to go into the public school, and that's a really funky situation to be when you're a RESC, because we work with public schools, and public schools are our clients, and we do PD there. However, we are seeing that divide that it creates, that private sector into the public sector of public school, and how there's that divide, and we don't want that divide either. We as a RESC want to bridge that gap, and we work really hard on that to do so, but this issue does not make that any easier for us. So we're essentially creating our own working poor within our state funded centers, within our teaching pool of early childhood. Another issue is demand for quality staff. As Jeff mentioned, we are a provider of quality improvement. We partner with Commissioner Bai on many initiatives that promote quality in early childhood. We believe in quality, but this is becoming a huge challenge for centers to find qualified staff. So not only are we not able to pay them, but we the state's funded centers are required, Head Start is required to have certain credentials, qualified staff members, right? In legislation, So this is becoming a huge challenge. And our higher ed system in Connecticut is wonderful. However, we don't have enough early childhood programs. So quite often these, to paint the picture, these underpaid staff individuals are being told, in order to keep your job at our state funded center, you need to have a certain amount of a degree, you need to have a certain amount of credits, but you have to take all your classes at night because you have to work all day long for the pay you're getting. So it's really creating a divide. And we all know too that professional development, for instance, in our public schools, sometimes all of our schools in our district right now are having PD days. So those teachers are getting their PD paid in a setting where their district is allowing it. We don't have that luxury in our early childhood programs that are privately funded or state funded. So we need to consider, as a state, possibly accepting degrees in other fields that would be able to allow for a quicker entry into the workforce. We also, someone mentioned before, I think it was Senator Anwar, the loan forgiveness and that entry point in high schools, giving, and this is something I think the RESCs can help with because we work in the schools, really looking at some of these early childhood programs that closed in high school settings for their students to learn, maybe looking at re-entering some of those ideas into some of the districts that we work with. So this is a crisis. We love early childhood, and I will have to say that our Office of Early Childhood was incredible during the pandemic. The communication was key. We, I think there was a slew of memos. I think Deb Fliss mentioned Friday at our event how many there were. We had to interpret every single one of them and get it quickly out to the field, but we were grateful for each and every memo that we got. The guidance was stellar, but this is a crisis. There are 12,000 plus children in state subsidized preschool across our state, and many of them are ALICE families. Those are limited low-income families. Taking Danbury, for example, our largest district that we serve with school readiness, 94% of their school readiness slots go to lower income working families that need the full daycare. And these programs are really trying to keep these families engaged, keep them going, but those directors each and every day have to debate the issue of their costs and staff and keeping staff and staff shortages. So we need a true reimbursement rate for state-funded providers, flexibility in hiring teachers, and a commitment to working families in Connecticut. Everything that was said on this call was spot on today. I really feel we're at a pivotal point to make some great decisions on this, and I'm happy to partner with anyone on this and also speak to any representatives that have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you, Jeff, as well. Last but not the least, we have Meryl Gay, who is Connecticut Early Child Care Alliance Executive Director, and somebody who's helped me learn about this, and somebody who's been a very effective advocate and a convener for people to share and then educate each and every one of the legislators what is at stake. So Meryl, thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for your coordination and help us understand where we go from here.
Thank you, Senator Anwar, Senator McCrory, and members of the Representative Linehan and Representative Sanchez, the chairs of the committees, and all of the members of the committees for listening today. I want to preface my remarks by first thanking Commissioner Bai and the Office of Early Childhood for the tremendous work that they did early in the pandemic, getting the federal funds out to providers. That really kept us from losing lots of childcare centers and family childcare providers. And I want to thank the legislature for what they did last year in putting in $100 million in a wage supplement. Those two things have kept the industry from collapsing last year and will help to sustain it in this coming year. To use a medical analogy, it's like we're the EMTs who showed up at an accident and we found the patient bleeding. We've put the bandage on and we've hooked them up to an IV, but now we need to deal with the internal bleeding and the other underlying conditions there. Childcare has always been a fragile industry. Someone pointed out to me that this is an industry where the market leader controls less than 2% of the market. And that's because it's always been such a low margin industry. Yes, there are pockets of Connecticut where providers can charge enough that they can earn a profit. But for most providers, they have to operate at 90 to 95% capacity in order to be breaking even and functioning. What we saw from Liz's presentation is that right now the industry is operating at substantially less than that capacity that they need to break even. I had a provider on a call yesterday tell me that it feels like we are standing on the precipice and the ground is crumbling underneath us. There are just lots of programs who are seeing their reserves dwindle and they can't hire staff because they can't pay a wage that's competitive in the economy. I mean, we've really seen this change from early in the pandemic, the questions being, how do we provide care safely? How do we make sure that our staff don't get sick? To then, okay, how do we deal with this when somebody does get sick and we have to quarantine and close classrooms? And now it's really fundamentally that we can't find staff because we can't afford to pay what others in the economy are paying. And the reason there is that it is much easier to raise the price of a cup of coffee than it is to raise the price of childcare because parents are already paying as much as they can. It's really, the childcare industry is stuck between the rock of parents not being able to pay more and the hard place of the rest of the economy paying more than they can. So programs are hemorrhaging experienced staff, and so many of them have told me about having to hire warm bodies because they need to try and stay in ratio. And yet we also see programs now getting cited for being out of ratio because they need to give staff a break so that they can eat lunch and use the bathroom. And if you don't have somebody else who can go into the classroom to maintain that 4-to-1 for infants and toddlers or 10-to-1 for preschool ratio, you're out of compliance and you get written up. And I've had providers tell me about, that they feel like they're public enemy number one in their community because the number of times they've needed to call families to say, you can't bring your kids today, I don't have staff, and how disruptive that is for families. I've also had providers tell me that things are so bad out there that they had to chase a competitor away from their parking lot because he was trying to recruit their staff away. Programs are really struggling right now. Marlo talked about how her program is short 50 staff out of a normal staff of 110. That means hundreds of children are not getting the benefit of preschool that you have budgeted for. And that's not an isolated problem in New Britain. In Bridgeport, the Alliance for Better Communities has 16 closed classrooms right now in their school readiness and CDC programs because they don't have enough staff. So fundamentally, this has been a problem of compensation. The state funding for those programs has not kept up with the increase in minimum wage, much less the increase in other wages. I mean, a year ago, programs were telling me, how are we going to pay $14 an hour we're going to have to raise rates even more than parents can afford. But that $14 an hour minimum wage is largely irrelevant at this point. You can't hire people for $14 an hour. It's just, you ask any employer in the economy, you're not finding them. And so now they're having to try and figure out how I'm going to pay even more than I was trying to budget for last year. For family childcare providers, this is actually even worse a problem. Family childcare providers, one of the reasons that families find them a particularly appealing place to put their kids is the added flexibility. I'm going to the provider's home. So, you know, if I've got to be at work at 7 o'clock, I could drop my kids off at 6:30 on the way to work. Or if I have to work late, I'm picking them up at the provider's home so I could come later. And then, of course, those providers have to clean, they have to buy supplies, they have to do all that. On average, family childcare providers, according to an OEC report, are working 68 hours a week. And that means that on average, they're only earning about $8.50 an hour. So if you're earning $8.50 an hour, and you're looking at your next door neighbor who's just gotten a job for, you know, 23 bucks an hour at Costco, you start to ask yourself, why do I keep doing this? Liz talked about the morale issues that were reported in her survey. There's not much more demoralizing for a teacher who's worked hard going to school at night to get her associate's or bachelor's degree to have her assistant teacher who doesn't have that credential go and get a job paying more than the teacher is earning. It makes you wonder, why do I keep doing this? Why am I so underappreciated? So the answer here is that the state funded programs need to get paid at a level where they can pay teachers and staff wages that are competitive in the economy. OEC has put together a compensation scale. It's still in draft form, but it is so much better than what providers are getting paid now. That is something that we need to work towards. We need to have our state-funded programs paid at a rate that they can pay staff on that compensation scale. We should do two other things when we're fixing that state-funded system. One is that we should make it possible for them to operate on the CDC or school readiness contract amount rather than having to blend in Care for Kids funding. Because what we have now is programs that are not getting paid enough through school readiness or CDC. You add in the parent fees, which aren't very much, and then there's a big gap. So they have to try and get some of their families onto Care for Kids as well. And in some places that's worked well, but in other places where there are large immigrant communities, where some of them are undocumented, those families are much more reticent about using a system that is much more detailed in looking at income verification. In a school readiness program, you ask the parent how much are they getting paid, they provide a paycheck. With Care for Kids, there's a whole connection to the Department of Labor to see how much people have earned over the last year. It's a much more intrusive process. And one of the problems that school readiness and CDCs have is that the parents aren't paying less if they get a Care for Kids certificate. They're getting paid the same amount. And yet they've got to provide all sorts of backup to get the family onto a Care for Kids so that the provider can actually get the subsidy they need to be able to be whole. The problem here is that because the system is underfunded, the people who have really been subsidizing the system are the staff who've been earning less than they really deserve. And, you know, we have taken advantage of caring providers who love kids for far too long. And right now, there are so many other opportunities where they can go earn more that the system is breaking. That the fact that you like kids isn't enough to keep you in a job that is a poverty wage. The other thing that we need to do is to fix the Care for Kids program. And there are a couple of problems there. First, it pays providers far less than the market rate. And even when you think about the market rate is determined by how much parents can pay. We know that when parents are just starting out, they're not at the peak of their earning capacity, they can't pay that much. So the market rate, using market rate to determine how much the subsidy system will pay, keeps the payment levels low. We should actually switch to a system that looks at what does it cost to provide quality care and provide payments to providers at that level. The other thing that is wrong with Care for Kids is that it serves far fewer families than people like Nicole who need help paying for the cost of childcare. The fact that our system does not serve all the families that need it means that we have lots of families who are not in the workforce. At a time when CBIA is telling us that there are tens of thousands of more open jobs than there are people in the workforce looking for a job. So changing Care for Kids so that it's paid based on the cost of quality rather than on a market rate is a key piece. Second is making more families eligible. And more immediately, the issue is that the federal pandemic money that came through ARPA and CRISA will run out. And we expanded eligibility from 50% to 60% of state median income. There's still lots more families who earn too much to qualify but can't afford childcare. But just for the families who do qualify, we are about to get to the point where we've run out of that extra federal money, and we're going to start to have a wait list where families who need care can't get a subsidy when they need it to go to work because there isn't the money to pay for them. So all of this does come down to the fact that this is an underfunded system. And I recently saw data that looked at how much do governments spend on infants and toddlers. And you know, Connecticut may be the most family-friendly state in the country, but that says much less about how great we are than how far behind the United States is behind the other advanced economies in the world. If you compare the United States to the other OECD countries, up at the top, you've got like Norway and Finland are spending like $27,000 per infant and toddler. The average is a little over $14,000 per infant and toddler. And the US is way down at $500 per infant and toddler. We are only above Turkey among those OECD countries. We grossly underinvest in young children at the very time when brain development is happening at its very fastest, and when we could have the most impact on setting children on the proper trajectory. It is far harder to intervene later when a child is delayed than it is to keep them on track early on. We need to invest in young children. The step that the legislature took this past year of increasing the number of funded infant and toddler slots through the Child Development Center program was a good thing. The question will be whether or not the funding level is enough in order for programs to provide to hire staff. It was a big increase from $8,500 on average to $13,500. But if you look at what does it actually cost to provide quality infant toddler care, it's well over $20,000. If you were going to a program in Simsbury or one of the wealthier suburbs, you're going to spend well over $20,000 on infant toddler care. We have for far too long relied on childcare workers to subsidize the cost of care, and that's just not working anymore. So you do need to come back to this, recognize that what you did was to put the bandage on the bleeding patient, but now we need to go back and address the issues that have our system crumbling. We need to inject more funding both into the state-funded programs and into the general subsidy program that helps the families and all of the other providers that are just tuition-based. And I'll end there.
Thank you, Merrill. Thank you for very insightful comments. What I wanted to do was to open the Q&A with the chairs of the two committees, and also have the commissioner weigh in as well after that, and then we can open it to my fellow legislators who have been listening to our conversation. I just wanted to first start with the co-chair for education, Bobby Sanchez. Representative Sanchez has been one of the stalwart supporter of this issue, and he's really passionate. He's been working hard at it. So, and then he wanted to ask some questions. So I'll start with him, and then Representative Linehan.
Thank you, Senator Anwar, and thank you everyone that participated today. Yes, I was a preschool teacher myself, and I had to leave as a preschool teacher because I knew I could not afford to raise my children, my child, and a family on the salary that I was making. And this was years ago. And here we are still arguing about salaries for these teachers. And, I want to thank Commissioner Bai for the work that she did, and OEC for the work they did this during the pandemic. It was really good work and sustaining the childcare system here in the state of Connecticut. But we still have some really big issues in regards to how we can bring forward affordable childcare and also raise those salaries that are so important in order to recruit and retain teachers. So my question to Commissioner Bai, if she's still on, Commissioner, I know that you shared with us a draft of the salary scale. Could you give us just a little bit of clarity on what we're paying a teacher with a bachelor's degree today versus what we should be paying them according to your salary scale? And the same with the teacher assistant.
Sure. Happy to. Do you want me to share my screen where I have the recommended pay based on your request, Representative Sanchez?
That'd be nice, because I want people to see the differences.
Yeah. Okay. Can you all see my screen now?
There we go. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So is that big enough, or should I make it bigger?
If you could make
what you'll see here is what, based on sort of, UConn did an analysis for us of various workforces and degrees required, et cetera, and pay in Connecticut. And according to that, these are the recommended pay levels for teachers in Connecticut. Most teachers with a high school degree get minimum wage now, CDA credential, slightly above minimum wage. Associate degree teachers are not making $21 an hour. I don't have the exact comparison. And I can tell you that bachelor level teachers are making in the mid $30,000 range. It's not that none of them are making more. Like public school teachers who are teaching early childhood ed tend to make closer to these numbers. So, but you can see that's closer to parity with the K to 12 system. And then with a master's, 64,000. I know my last job in early childhood with a master's was about $40,000. That was maybe 10 years ago. So we're nowhere near these numbers because of what has been explained so well here today, that the revenues coming in don't support this. Parent fees can't support the rates that it takes to get these salaries for teachers.
And if we were to talk about funding next session, and I'm wishful thinking, but what are we looking at? What would you say in order to get even slightly closer to those rates? How much additional funding would we need to provide?
Well, I appreciate that question, Representative Sanchez. That's really a question, the governor will have a budget and the legislature will react to that budget, and there will be an answer. I could say that those 80% of programs' budgets are salaries on average. Now, there are some sort of for-profits where that number is lower, but about 80% is wages. So if you see those wages are 15 to 30% to 50% less than what those workers would be making in other industries, you can see the problem that you heard exacerbated, how the problem that you heard about that's always been a problem has been exacerbated in this time. Sadly, early childhood ed is the lowest paid profession in the state. And so at a time when low wage workers are in high demand, early childhood has been hit very badly. I also want to mention, Representative Sanchez, that we're really grateful. There are 8 community partners who have launched workforce pipeline projects in Westport, New Haven, Norwalk, Hartford, Bridgeport, London, West Haven, and Meriden, where they will be recruiting and training and getting teacher assistants sort of classroom ready in 12 and 24-week programs. We also signed an agreement this year with SEIU, and we'll be working with them on an apprenticeship program with family child care. So we have some things in the pipeline, but bottom line is we're not seeing as many majors in the colleges because it's not, doesn't pay off in the end. So we have a pipeline that has shrunk. We have higher ed programs that are no longer in existence because there's not enough of a pipeline. And so over time, the problem's gotten worse. And now with other opportunities, paying $20 to $22 an hour, that aren't as hard work, not as rewarding. I will say it's a great profession, but not as hard work. So there's definitely investment, and the governor has been working super hard to make our federal delegation aware that he believes the scope and size of this challenge is a national one and that we need a federal response.
And just one other question. I got many questions, but I know I don't have all the time. But one quick question in regards to
who cut Bobby off there?
I think.
Sorry about that.
I'm very interested.
And he was so ready to ask it, Senator Anwar.
Yeah. So I have Representative Linehan who's next on. So Representative Linehan, you're next, and then Senator McCrory is next after that.
Thank you very much, Senator. And I'll be quick because hopefully we'll be able to get Bobby back because he's so knowledgeable. And so a lot of his questions are really important to get out there. But my question is also for Commissioner Bai. So if you wouldn't mind, Commissioner, we're talking about salaries for educators, and that's hugely important. And I think that's really something that we need to dig deep into, not just last session, not just this next session, but moving forward long term. But one of the things I want to ask is really about some of the work that we tried to do in the past regarding tax breaks for businesses who either help subsidize their employees' early childhood care, whether it be childcare or pre-K. We did have a couple of bills through the Children's Committee to do that. And then also wondering about the amount of debt that is being carried from or by childcare centers through the pandemic, and that if we were to look to see if we can use federal funding to forgive some of those loans, would that succeed in opening up more spots in these childcare centers and actually being able to pay their teachers more? Commissioner?
Representative Lenahan, I think when this hearing started, you and Senator Anwar said you were looking for original ideas, and I do believe that this idea of looking both at taxes and expenses, so I think we need to look always, and I do think business is part of the solution. And I know OEC has been looking at some options, working with businesses, and CBIA has been doing some work building a coalition of businesses to address these issues. I think those are longer term solutions. Meryl did a nice job of explaining exactly how hazardous this is right now. So I think those would be helpful. I don't think they would open spaces right away. So that was the first part of your question. What was the second part of your question again? I'm sorry.
I'm just wondering how much debt do our child care centers carry right now through trying to stay open from the pandemic? I don't even know if you have any numbers on that, or even if the state gave any of those loans to child care centers.
Well, we heard very clearly as we were structuring our ARPA dollars that child care programs did not want loans. They needed straight up grants because they weren't going to be in a place to pay those back. So we didn't do, some other states structured it so they were loans and grants. We just got the money out in direct cash. There's certainly child care providers who are carrying debt. And there are child care centers and family child care homes that put expenses on their credit cards to stay open during the pandemic. That was an allowable use of their stabilization dollars to pay off debts that they incurred during the pandemic when they were open because of lower enrollments. And I do have some data from programs in terms of the funds, because you heard us, Meryl say, and others, that the funds are running out. We do know that programs have expended now about 2/3 of their stabilization dollars. So a year ago, it was about half, and now we're up over 2/3. Some of them structured it so they could give a raise a little bit every month for the period of time. But so those funds are being depleted. And I think programs have been smart, but they have used them to pay off debt.
Great, thank you. And then just one last question, and it's, I'm really asking you to, but let's that it was not difficult to find quality early childhood educators and that we can afford to pay them well. Let's just say that. Yep. Beyond that, what is the one thing that you think we can do to open up spots and or centers immediately without, or rather the quickest, without sacrificing quality? I mean, I know that we talk about, there have been many people out there saying, I can't find a place for my child to go. And a lot of people have said it's due to, the staff ratios. Raising a ratio gives me great pause because we need to make sure that our children are taken care of appropriately. So do you believe that raising ratios is appropriate? Or do you think that there's something else that we could do, of all things being equal, that we had enough staffing and that they were paid appropriately? Is there something that we're missing otherwise that maybe we can implement?
Yeah, one thing is I do think we need to dig into the group family child care home. I know there's like an incubator being planned in New Britain. Like, how can we use some leftover spaces that aren't people's homes that could follow more of the family child care home? Parents are looking for smaller programs sometimes, and the biggest shortage is infant toddler care. So we are going to be bringing together the group family homes to say, what are your challenges? New York has thousands more family group homes than we do. And I think in childcare deserts where they don't need huge centers, these group family homes could be a strategy. So if you're saying, what's a strategy we can look at now? This legislature has passed some legislation to pilot these incubators, the family child care home, sort of group home incubators. I think we could lean into that, and that will deal with regulations. I do have concerns, and I'm speaking as an infant toddler teacher myself. When you're taking care of 4 babies or 4 toddlers all on your own, and 2 of you are taking care of 8, the governor was visiting a center a couple weeks ago, and he said to the director, "What do you think of the ratios? Could it be different?" And she said, "That I can't imagine that would be super hard." So focusing on infant toddler care, looking for innovation, maybe in our family child care home statutes, they proved to be an incredible resource during this pandemic.
Great. Thank you so very much. I look forward to digging into that. And I will say, I had 3 kids in diapers, and taking care of 3 on my own was shocking and exhausting. And I can't imagine doing that for a job for 20 years. So God bless everybody who does this. Thank you so very much. And Commissioner, as always, it is really fantastic to be able to have you in the position that you're in, because you lived it. This is what you did. And then you also came from the legislative side. So I think that your wealth of knowledge is really amazing. And I appreciate you greatly. And I look forward to really digging into this come next session. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Representative Linehan. Representative Sanchez, you're back on.
Thank you, Senator. My connection here is really bad. So just quickly, because I know there's other questions out there. In regards to technical schools, state technical schools, I was wondering if there could be some type of collaboration formed so that they can also get into this field, because they do nursing, they do culinary, they do everything. So why not childcare?
Representative Sanchez, this is why the legislature is so important, because Michelle Cook asked me that exact question last week. So we are looking into this. And I'm grateful to those of you that took time to go to Phoenix. We started that Early Childhood Solutions Consortium, sort of started in Connecticut and then grew and grew and grew. As we said, we needed support. But I do think that was an original idea that came out of there that's worth pursuing. And I'm sorry, Senator Anwar, but I have a commitment at 1 o'clock with OPM that I need to go to. So I have time maybe for one more question.
Sure. And at OPM, would you make sure that you talk about what we have been talking about?
I will, believe me.
And we have the last question from my friend, Senator. Go ahead.
Well, it's not necessarily a question, but Merle made a comment about we should be fine. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. I'm learning so much. I'll be honest, early childhood education is not my main forte, but for the last couple of years, working with my colleague, Bobby, he has educated me to how important this is. And as I'm listening to the commentary today, I'm learning more and more. Clearly, we have a multi-pronged problem. We have cost. Cost of running facilities, one thing. You have salaries, and then you have human resources. You don't have the people, the capacity. We don't have individuals going to this field. Merle mentioned that we should be looking at instead of just looking at costs, what will it take how much does a quality child care facility look like? What does cost look like for quality care? And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's the same kind of question people ask in traditional education. How much it costs to educate a child? Flip that here. What is the cost for quality care? Yeah. And I wonder if that cost differentiates between where you live and socioeconomic means, right? Because if you have a kid who comes from resources, at the end of the day, they have resources, parents have resources, but the kid just need a place for the kid to go. But if you're dealing with a kid that don't have as many resources and don't have many support systems in place, I'm assuming the care is going to be a little different. So when you say how much it costs for quality childcare, I don't know if I want to ask you, do you want to expand on that? But that's a very interesting point. The second thing is, and I'm glad that someone said about our techno schools. If we want to start the pipeline, why not start it there? That's a conversation I really think we should have. And lastly, you mentioned Care for Kids should go to the provider as opposed to, I'm assuming going to the parents. Is that how that works? How will that be more beneficial if the Care for Kids dollars going to the provider, the pay going to the provider as opposed to the individuals? You want to try to touch a
Senator,
couple?
Senator,
Yeah.
I can very quickly share my screen here again. The federal government required all states to do what they called a narrow cost analysis. That is, what is the full cost of quality? And I'll share this with the committee, but very quickly, the average cost of preschool, the full cost is $14,487. This next number is going to knock you over, but you know the ratio's less than is 4-to-1 versus 10-to-1. The full cost of infant toddler care, high quality, that's what you asked, Senator, is $28,000. So this is why we have a shortage of infant toddler care. Parents can't pay that amount, and the state just increased its rates 58%, but it doesn't approach this. And then we also have a base for family child care, which would be $10,759 a week. So we do have that question. Your second question was about the pipeline. I totally agree with you. We need a pipeline that's different. And Care for Kids is generally paid to the provider. It doesn't go to the parent. So I'm not sure who was talking, what you were referring to, but that does go to the provider. It's below the market rate, but that is how it goes.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bai. I know you have another meeting, and we will continue our conversation with you. Thank you again for making.
Yes, and we'll send you these materials along, and I hope they're helpful. And I'm so grateful for the legislative interest and the advocates and parents who are here today. So thank you.
Thank you. And I will hold my questions right now. And I know my colleagues have questions, so I'd want them to make their comments and ask their questions. Representative McCarty, followed by Senator Kushner. Representative McCarty.
Sorry, Senator Anwar, can you hear me now?
Very well.
Thank you very much. And I apologize, I lost the screen just as I tried to hit the button. I'm sorry the commissioner had to leave, but I'd like to look and try to get back to the source of why we have this situation in our early child care industry to begin with. And I think we're making great advantages right now and advances to let the public know how critical it is, how critical early child care is, not only to child development, but to our workforce. And I think that's an area that we need to come together and continue to advocate for. I think as we change the perception in society about that critical importance, we'll find a better willingness to help us with the salary enhancement with the workforce. I know the commissioner is tremendously dedicated to looking at creativity and innovation with our programs, with the family care, child care, and she proved that last session with all of the flexibility that was given to those programs. I listened to Michelle earlier. We need to look back in our traditional high schools as well to be sure that those pipelines are there, as well as looking at the tech ed schools going forward. But I just wanted to make a comment because this is a bipartisan issue. We're all committed to really finding the solutions. We're lucky to have these experts here today that continuously highlight the problems that we have, but also offer some of the solutions that we can use. I think we do not want to overlook our business industry. They came last year to the press conference. They showed a willingness. They want to be partners with us to find the answers so we have the workforce ready. But I think perception is a big issue. I know the Office of Early Childhood has an excellent website. I'd like to try to maybe look at some of what we're doing in the tourism industry and borrow from that, so we can do that, the same type of really concerted effort on early childcare programs and the absolute critical necessity for them. I think we're getting there, but I think there's work to do. And I just wanted to make the comment today because I am committed to doing all I can to be helpful. Thank you, Senator Anwar.
Thank you, Representative McCarty. Thank you for your comments. And I was going to just also make a statement that in this whole situation, the real good news is that there are no two sides. Everybody's on the same side on this issue, whether it's the Office of Early Childhood, whether it's the legislators, whether it's all the advocates, we are all in this together. Senator Kushner.
Thank you. And I do want to thank the chairs of Education and Children for putting on this informational forum today, because I found it incredibly informational, but also really underscored what I already knew was a most significant problem, and that is the rates that we are providing now for our early childhood programs. And it's the fact that we haven't had a rate increase in 7 years, I know has been underscored by Ed Advance every time I go to any of the trainings or any of the meetings. And I really appreciated the presentation on that, as well as you mentioned, the presentation from HRA from Dr. Marlowe. It was really significant to hear it talked about here. And Representative Linehan, I'm really glad you said what you did about Commissioner Bai. I think having someone who has been on the ground, who really understands these issues and really has devoted her whole life to early childhood education, we are so fortunate to have her. I know she's not here to hear the accolades, but nonetheless, I think it's important to underscore how fortunate we are to have her in that position. And it reflects well on the Lamont administration, because it shows us that they want to have someone who is leading this important area of our state's economy with someone who understands all of the issues. I guess my question is really to all of us legislators. I think we are so challenged by the importance of infusing this field with budget increases. I know that every time we get into appropriations, I'm on appropriations, a lot of my colleagues here are on appropriations, we're challenged by how to balance the budget and how to come up with the right funding. But I do think I want to say to all of the advocates that have been working on this issue that your continued work is critically important. I'm sorry that we didn't get to see the slideshow from the Day of Action, that Day Without Childcare was last spring. I know as a legislator, it made a huge impact on me and on my colleagues. And so I do want to encourage the coalition, the partners. Eva, I want to see your slideshow someday, because I feel like you need to understand that really did help us to sort of raise the interest amongst all of us. So I guess going back to a question, and I don't know which panelist is best suited to answer this, is what would you see as our target for raising the rate that you need in order to just meet your basic needs in these centers? I think it would be helpful if we had a target number to focus on. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Senator Anwar.
Thank you. I'll have Merrill be the one to take the stab at that first.
At the preschool level, we ought to be raising the school readiness and CDC rate to $14,500. And we ought to be expecting that we can do that all within the program and not expect programs to have to blend in funds from Care for Kids at the same time. Now, that's the amount that's in the OEC narrow cost analysis. I think we need to look carefully as to whether or not that is actually enough to pay on the compensation scale, and to include things like health coverage. This is an industry where lots and lots of staff don't have health insurance. And for the family child care providers who are small businesses on their own, that's another, that's a real challenge, paying for health care as well for them. I know a number of programs that will tell you that their actual cost of providing a school readiness program, a quality program, is more like $17,000 or $18,000. The Children's Learning Center in Stanford has to raise a couple $1 million every year to subsidize the cost of their program. And other programs that are able to spend that much, it's because they're doing a lot of fundraising outside of the state contract.
Thank you for that. And I have another question and a comment from Representative Nolan, one of the best dressed legislators I know.
Stop it. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to speak. My question was just actually asked is in regards to the rate that we were going to be looking at. So I thank you for that. And it is a good concern in regards to the health insurance. And that's one of the reasons why, we should have health insurance coverage for all. But I really wanted to first say thank you to the chairs of both committees, along with the commissioner, Marlo and Merrill, and everybody who spoke today. Michelle, thank you. Just the information that you were able to give us back so that it could prepare us to see what we need to attack when we go back. I do recall yesterday in a meeting that we had that people are willing to take monies that we didn't take enough of prior to session ending. There was a lot of bipartisan chat yesterday in regards to people that are in need. I think the child care and education, we're in a state of emergency for that still. And I think that if we don't fix it like we need to fix it, that our businesses, both big and small, are going to be even more affected. We're going to have less people at work and more people at home taking care of their kids just because they can't afford to. It's unfortunate to say, but they can't afford to work because of the cost of childcare or the little that we're putting into it. And I'm grateful for all my colleagues that helped push this through the last session. But I'm looking forward to pushing it a little harder as we go forward, because I think it's imperative that we put what we need in this fund and stop doing the Band-Aids. And, sometimes it's going to hurt, but I think I'd rather it hurt a little bit than we keep putting these little Band-Aids on, these open wounds that are not, helping us in the long run. So I look forward to talking to many of you in regards to more conversation in regards to what we talked about today. But I do thank everybody for all that you've been able to put in and invest with the knowledge that you give to help us understand. So thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Representative Nolan. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to ask my questions quickly. Merrill, maybe you can, if we wanted to retain and recruit, and then have the best teachers going forward, there's obviously a pay scale issue, but there's also a healthcare issue, loan forgiveness. What are the other things that we can look at? If you can list 2 or 3, and anybody else can jump in too.
Sure. It's one of the issues that, public school teachers work 180-day calendar. Early educators are working year round. And in the current climate with staff shortages, I had one provider telling me he was just distraught at having to ask his staff not to take their vacations because he would be out of ratio and he'd have to send kids home. That's where we're at now. It's that stressed, but we need to raise the status of early educators. We need to stop pretending that they're babysitters and understand that they are the people who are helping to build small children's brains. That is some of the most important work that we can do to build a healthy future for our country, is to make sure that children are getting what they need in their early years. I mentioned earlier the issue of, how much should you be paying for the school readiness preschool program. I said 14.5 and then qualified it that that's maybe not enough. For the child care subsidy program, the federal government recommends that you be paying providers at the 75th percentile of the market so that they could access 3/4 of the child care that's out there. We're currently well below that. I think for preschool, we were at the 25th percentile a couple of years ago, and we know that rates have gone up. So I said earlier that we should be paying based on the cost of quality as opposed to the market rate. But an interim step would be to pay providers at the 75th percentile of the market while doing that cost of quality study to really figure out what it should be going forward. But don't keep paying so little to providers now that, the family child care providers are making $8.50 an hour.
Thank you. Anybody else wants to weigh in of the panelists that were speaking earlier?
If I may, for
Please,
a moment.
Dr. Grappone, yes.
I would only add to that, because I echo everything that Meryl stated, but I would only add to that to ensure that in your discussions, you recall that besides the teaching staff, there are also many support staff associated with providing a quality program. And especially the staff that are providing those support services are critical to our organizations remaining fully enrolled, as well as addressing the additional concerns, the social determinant of health concerns associated with providing services to families from low to moderate income households. So please remember that your investment in early childhood education and care is also going to impact all of those other critical concerns that are happening across the state.
Thank you so much. And I will have one quick question for anybody. What are the things that we can do as legislators for the centers, not for the teachers, but for the centers?
I think one of the major things that we can do for the centers and I guess childcare in general is to make sure that we have funding and that we structure funding in a way that's sustainable. Not as much as we gave many accolades throughout today for the help that the state has done, OEC, the legislature. We just want to make sure that no one's forgotten, and the plans that are instituted for the next legislative session are long-term. Oftentimes when we talk about people who are in distress and markets who need help, and childcare being one of them, right? One of the most important of them, it's easy to say we're going to help you 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and then forget about it. So it'd be very, very sad if we forget about these workers who need our help right now.
If you were to look at universal pre-K, there are so many people that are looking at universal pre-K and they're passionate about it, but there is a little bit of a confusion what that would look like, because we can just decimate this industry if we don't do this right. And then we need to build on what we have and then strengthen it rather than go back to the drawing board. If Meryl, you want to weigh in?
Absolutely. Universal pre-K is something that many parents would love to not have to pay for childcare. I've had providers or had families tell me that when their kids got to go to kindergarten that was free, that it felt like they'd hit the lottery because they weren't paying for childcare anymore. But we have to understand that the childcare industry in this country relies on preschool age children to pay the bills, because that cost, that $28,000 cost for infant toddler care, there are very few people in the state, and this is a wealthy state, who can actually afford to pay that much money for infant toddler care. So programs are typically only paying for the staff out of the cost of the tuition, and they're grossly underpaying those staff. All of the other costs, the overhead costs, are being borne by the preschool kids. So preschool children internally subsidize the infants and toddlers in most programs. If you take the preschoolers out and put them into a public school setting, you then crush what's left of the infant toddler care system. And we had a program telling us today that their public school system had just added a class of pre-K that was free, and they were struggling because parents were withdrawing their children. So that's something we need to be very careful about. I am all for the idea of getting to the point where parents don't have to pay for preschool, but we should do it in the mixed delivery system where we, rather than put it all in the public schools, use the existing capacity for preschool in community providers and essentially pay for it there rather than paying for it in a public school. We have a mixed system where parents have the choice of putting their kids into a public school setting or putting their children at the child care center where their younger sibling is there. And I also want to say that you could do this as well in family child care, that family child care providers can provide high quality preparation for kindergarten. We need to make sure that the supports for professional development are there, but that is, you think about it, they're actually a much smaller ratio. They've only got 6 kids in the setting as opposed to having 10 kids. So that's, all of those things are options. If we're going to go to a universal pre-K system, it has to be in a mixed delivery system.
Thank you. Eva, you had a comment.
That with your permission, Senator, I wanted to show the slide deck of the diversity and all the happy faces that have been participating in actions different times this year.
Sure. If I may ask just one more question before we do that. What are the models in United States, and what states in United States have done it right outside of Connecticut?
I think that's many of us, but I will start it off. Washington, D.C. Has passed significant money, Nevada, New Mexico, but I'll pass it to other experts here.
Yeah, there are a number of other states that have done pieces of this. I don't know that there's anybody who's got it fully done. There are states that claim to have universal pre-K that actually have fewer children in a preschool, getting to attend preschool before kindergarten than we have here in Connecticut. But the question is, who's paying for it? In Connecticut, it's mostly parents who are paying for it. So I'll do the lit search to find the places that I would hold up as models.
I would also add, I'll pass it to Liz in a second here. New Mexico is the best model we have in the nation, but the problem with the New Mexico model is that, the problem for us in Connecticut is that they have mineral funds that they're using to pay for it. So we don't have mineral funds or a commodity that we can, get from the earth and sell and then say, we're going to use that money to then pay for childcare. We don't have diamonds. We don't have oil. We don't, Connecticut has many things, but we don't have that. So I'll pass it to Liz.
No, actually, Eva, that was the same comment I was going to make, that New Mexico, but yes, they have resources, but it is a really excellent model about how they believe that the resources in their state that they have are worthy. It's a worthy investment to support their children. So one of the states that has had the hardest time keeping up is really going all in to make sure that they are going to increase their children's outcomes and their family outcomes in the state. And that's really important.
Thank you. Michelle Anderson, you have a comment as well.
Yes, just one final comment. I do think that like Meryl said, if we're going to do this UPK, we have to bridge the divide between the community, and everyone has a place in this. The capacity of the community programs can help the schools who have limited space often. I do want to say, though, as we're talking about other state models and we're talking about, you know, doing things differently, I think we have a lot to learn from these original state-funded school readiness programs. I kind of got my career in early childhood when that legislation passed. Back in, Meryl probably knows the date, but you know, it was the original welfare to work concept for working families. I think Representative McCarty kind of said, how did we get into this position? I think it was just, you know, a fix for that at the moment. And then these centers were required to follow all of the state OEC and at the time SDE's requirements for quality. So these are the centers that are not receiving the adequate funding, but are also told they have to follow the Connecticut Early Learning Standards, the Connecticut DOTS, the evaluation tool. They have to have all the NIAC accreditation. These are centers that we as a state, all of us on this call and meeting, that they're markers of quality. So I think we have to really think about that as we think about a system. There's a lot of knowledge in these centers, and some of these directors have been here for a long time working under these tough conditions of making sure all their staff have all that they need for a quality program, and they year after year achieve quality through NIAC. So I think we have lots of lessons to learn. They're a critical piece in helping with the solution.
Thank you. And Dr. Grippone, you would be the last one to answer this question.
So I'd like to echo what everyone else said, of course, but just quickly going back to the universal pre-K concern and sharing that, in fact, we have explored and implemented the process of converting preschool slots to infant toddler slots. And so I just wanted to paint a real picture for you to consider with that. And that is very challenging process to accomplish. In addition, when we are converting, we're going from being able to serve 40 children with the same or similar number of staff, which is four staff to 40 children, to serving 8 children with 3 staff or 3.5 staff, if we really would like to be able to serve with the level of quality that's required by all of the mandates. So although instinctively, as well as anecdotally in our communities, we know that converting and increasing the number of slots for infant toddler care available to our families is absolutely a need. We also have proven that it's very challenging and difficult to go through that conversion and actually afford to be responsive to the need for care to the families. So
thank you so much. With that, what we will do now is we will have Eva's presentation, but before that, right after the presentation, this meeting will be adjourned. I just wanted to have the closing comments. I wanted to thank the Education Committee members, the leadership of the Education Committee, the members of the Children's Committee, and my co-chairs and my colleague co-chairs from the Education Committee. This is one of the priorities. This is the priority for us as the committees, but it's a priority for us as a state, because this is a critical part and the first most important piece of solving the economic opportunities for our state, but also making sure that our most vulnerable and arguably one of the most important citizens of our state are taken good care of. So we will remain engaged. We will focus on this. This will be part of our efforts of the two committees to work together going forward. With that, we'll have the pictures so that we can put it in perspective why this is of value, and we will adjourn after the presentation is over. Thank you. Eva, you're on. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Have a great rest of the day.